We have about 15 minutes left, and I really would like to address a few of the questions. First, I would like to go to Cor, who has been monitoring the questions that have been put in Curator, the e-course platform. Cor, could you come up with one or two questions that have been put on Curator?
Thank you, Lisette. Actually, on Curator, there was quite a rich harvest of questions prior to this session, 15 plus reactions. There's not time to look at each and every one of them. But let me start with a question for Sergiy on the repurposing topic. A question by Phyllis Addo from Ghana, lecturer at the university. And she asks, what is the most realistic entry point for countries like Ghana to begin repurposing agricultural support, especially where existing subsidies are politically sensitive and farmer livelihoods depend heavily on them? Sergiy.
Excellent question. First of all, in all countries, all subsidies are politically sensitive. I think agriculture is politically sensitive sector because it's associated with food, something close to our hearts, right? And I think it's not just the reality in Ghana. Second is, I would say, and show the example of that where the potential entry points could be. We are in the World Bank. We are trying to really look on we appreciate the government's concerns about the needs to help farmers, right? On the other hand, we know that the fiscal space is very limited everywhere. There are demands everywhere. And you have to really think hard whether to build the long-term competitiveness, reduce production costs through research, extension, infrastructure, information, or help from harvest to harvest farmers, right? And again, in developed countries, there are 2-3% of people employed in agriculture. These countries spend 0.3, 0.5% of GDP. And even in these countries, farmers always complain that it's not enough, input prices are too high, output prices are too low. And then we go to developing country where 20, 30, 40% of people employed in agriculture. That country will never have fiscal space to provide meaningful support to farmers, never. And so I think it's could be easy solution to continue subsidize something which will show very limited impact because you can support maybe 5% of your farmers, not 40. Or you can still continue with some short-term programs. And I think it's an opportunity in the case of Ghana, maybe what the World Bank has worked in recent years on the digital farm registration and designing and targeting the different support instruments much better. I think it's the first step and the entry point. So to move to the better delivery modes, because once you have the good farm registry system and the extension officers in Ghana are in charge of filling those, to provide and to working with farmers to fill the information, you can build the next elements to like the e-advisory services, soil testing. You can link vaccination to the farm registry. So I think once building this foundational infrastructure could be the entry point to go to the next step of reforming the subsidies in a country. Over.
Thank you very much, Sergiy. Another question to Bas, and then I move the mic back to Lisette, I think. Bas, one of the questions on the Curator platform was about data and digital technology. It's a question by Philemon Tete Addo, who works in an agtech company. How do you see climate smart data such as agronomic data, remote sensing, climate risk indices being integrated into risk assessment models so that you can unlock more affordable impact capital and markets for smallholders?
Yeah, that's another wonderful question. Thanks a lot. I would say it's still incipient, but we are at the stage where these solutions are becoming more fit to scale, as well as becoming more mature, thanks to also the efforts that are being done on, I mentioned the EUDR earlier. We see that at the level of local banks, MFIs, and financial service providers, it is still not being back-to-back integrated. For example, in terms of alternative credit scoring, or even on the level of insurance, crop insurance, weather insurance. But we are growing more towards, I would say, a broader landscape where these types of products and service offerings are going more hand in hand. And I believe that the promise is huge. Because I think in the end, in my humble opinion, we all want to produce more food with less land, and we also don't want to have that at the cost of water scarcity, land degradation, and the other external effects that we see happening. And precision agriculture, satellite-based imagery to do more precision agriculture or smart irrigation are helping us to get to that point. And that is becoming more and more crucial, specifically what we see happening across the agri landscapes in the African context. So we as Rabo, and specifically Rabo Foundation, are specifically doubling down on a lot of these solutions that are still incipient in the market. And we are working together with financial service providers as well as agtechs to scale out these solutions. We are also working together with MFIs and other types of digital lenders to integrate this. But it's still an emerging market. Yeah.
Thanks, Bas. Very enlightening. Back to
Thanks.
Lisette.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It would have been wonderful if we would have had a little bit more time. We don't, so I am going to Marielle. And Marielle, could you say one or two questions that have been posted in the chat that would be interesting for Sergey or Bas to answer now?
I have
Yes.
one question which I think I wanted to pose to Sergey, again from Phyllis Ado, about how some of the efforts that World Bank is doing, how this is balancing and how there is a trade-off in Africa with respect to the fertilizer industry, especially the dynamics between importing fertilizer and promoting locally produced organic alternatives. So that is an interesting question, I think. And then I have one more question for Bas, and then I leave it with that.
From all of the questions, Marielle, you pick the most challenging one, no? Okay.
I thought so. But this is important for us.
I will answer that question, but there is the question from Zafir on Program for Results, which I just take 1 minute. Zafir, when you go to the website, so the Program for Results become important World Bank instrument. About 14% of total lending now goes through it. So in the website I showed in my presentation, you will find on the tab investments, you will because there are 3 ways how the World Bank support reforms through financing. It's development policy loans, Program for Results, and investment lending. And you will find all information about Program for Results there, and that will answer your questions in terms of regions. But it's very promising instrument. I like it. It's more challenging for us and for our clients, but I think it's quite good. So let me come back to the question about the imports. The reality is, and it's always have to be balanced between import and domestic production, but it's the market who has to decide that, not the government. There are very few exporters of fertilizers in the world. Very few importing countries can afford not to import. I think it's, again, it depends on each country. I think there is a great role in each country to work on the blending of the fertilizers. I think there is a huge need for better blending. in terms of the size of the products or in terms of the composition of the products. The one reason why the crop diversification is slow in many African countries is that because lack of the suitable fertilizers. And so organic is also come there. And organic is often in many countries, organic closely linked to the livestock, right? And which is also quite challenging. It's a higher value product. And we always know that why higher value products are called higher value products, because they are more difficult to produce. And because supply is lagging demand, that's what called higher value product. If you have, and so the livestock is not developing well in Africa, it's slow, so you don't have a lot of materials. And I think, so if we can, let's not go into those extremes where it's either or, right? There is a role for organic and non-organic, and there is a role for import and for the domestic production. And I think if we are become pragmatic in that regard, because unfortunately for many countries around the world, not only in Africa, but around the world, there are maybe 10 suppliers of the fertilizers, and all 90% of the countries have to import, unfortunately. So I think one has to be pragmatic in terms of what countries can do, they cannot do. One that pragmatism is right, I see a bright future in terms of blending, in terms of organic, and in terms of creating demand, because at the end of the day, you wanted to offer solutions to farmers at lowest costs. That is the most important. I don't care where it comes from, but I think the farmer at the end of the day, if they receive the good services, the good product, they will guarantee a lot of benefits, food security, income, nutrition. But if farmer is not getting the product, it doesn't matter, import or domestic production, then forget about the rest. And I think that's for me, the litmus test of the government to think through these trade-offs as we move forward. Over.
Okay, thank you. Maybe it is
Marielle,
nice.
before you pose your next question, as it is time actually now, before people have to log off, those that really have to go now, thanks for being here, and we will harvest all the questions that have been posted in the chat, and we will see if we can find a way to have some of them answered after the webinar. But for those of you who can stay for a few more minutes, we have one more question from Marielle for Bas from the chat.
Yeah. Before that, I wanted to ask Sergiy to share the document on performance result-based planning. You mentioned the document and the program for results.
I mentioned that on the website, which I had in my presentation, the last website, right?
So there is a link.
You will find the tab which talked about the financing.
Okay.
And so program for results is one of our financing instruments. And so there are probably 18 projects we have using that instrument of support. So for each project, we have project appraisal documents, and there is a hyperlink on the website. So when you go, you can pick. In Africa, we have program for results in Tanzania, Zambia, Togo, and Senegal.
Okay, thank you. Well, there were also many interesting questions for Bas about use of digital services, stimulation of climate-based, climate-smart agriculture, also more questions about the explanation of ACON and how carbon credits can benefit smallholder farmers. So I'm in favor of putting these questions in, asking you to answer them. But the one question I wanted to give back to you was from Onas Karoho about how blended finance will actually help you to lend to the more risky segments. Is that actually happening in your organization?
And thank you, Marielle, and I will try to make this very brief. The short answer is yes, but it's not happening at scale yet. And I think it goes down to the discussion that we had earlier around putting the right incentives in place, where both private and public players can come together, that's based on the common shared agenda. The right incentives are in place to do the right things and to make that a bit more tangible. Sometimes the certain types of, I keep referring to guarantees to make it a little bit more tangible. they are not put in place with the right incentives, because sometimes there are expectations from organizations that want to sort of penetrate a more risky segment of a certain rural market or customer segment. They view it as a silver bullet if a corporate organization like Rabobank itself can come in and therefore de-risk a local organization to penetrate that specific segment. Of course, the reality of these things is way more complex, and you don't want to get caught up in sort of cat and mouse games with regards to cost of funding. What you do want to see is that both types of players, they actually play their role within the ecosystem, we as Rabo can step up our game as well when it comes to providing guarantees ourselves, for example, which in my humble opinion we don't do enough of, to help organizations to get there. I think in the end, Rabo's role in, let's say, local African ecosystems is that we are trying to leverage other organizations, local banks, food system, digital lenders. So they are to allow them, to equip them to reach more riskier segments. And we do that through concessional capital, but we also do that through other instruments, or usually a blend of both. And in the end, it's very much tailor-made to the specific circumstances of that organization. So I hope that sort of answers the question. I think there is still a room for improvement. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it's good if you answer the questions in writing to give some suggestions on how to scale it. That would be useful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, a lot of
Thanks, everybody. It's really a pity that we don't have more time for the questions, because I think there were a lot of interesting ones in the chat and also before in the curator. Thank you very much, Sergey and Bas, sharing your experiences and your views on both the role for public support, but also private finance. It's clear that there is a role for both, and an important one, and that there is a challenge of doing this in synergy. So let's keep on working towards that. We will see and talk with Bas and Sergey how we can get some of your other questions answered in the coming days. So we will let you know how that will be shared. Thanks a lot, everybody, and thanks for joining the webinars. This was the last one during this e-course. Wishing you lots of success with this module and the next. And again, thank you very much, Bas and Sergey, for sharing your views. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you
Bye.
too.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of the day.